Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Samira, and I'm really excited for this conversation with the Ford team, all about how Ford aligns and drives faster with OKRs and how they've really accelerated out of the pandemic. I am Samira Moinpour, and I am the VP of Customer Success at WorkBoard, and I'm delighted to introduce our panel today. First, we have Annie Gowerin. Annie is currently leading the Energy Services Product Group at Ford and has a background in digital product and business operations. She's previously held roles as the Chief of Staff for Ford Model E, digital products, as well as a few other digital product roles within Ford and at startups. She's originally from Alaska and in her spare time has a passion for fitness and running her own startup. Next, we have Jim Gowerin, who's the Chief of Staff of Ford Pro. Jim is passionate about democratizing advanced mobility solutions, including electrification, connectivity for businesses of all sizes, increasing productivity, and promoting more sustainable operations. He currently leads strategy and governance for Ford Pro, a separate business within Ford delivering solutions to commercial customers to increase productivity through connected services and work-ready gas and electric vehicles. And third, we have Matt Stewart, who's a strategic results manager and certified OKR coach at Ford. Matt is a proven leader with history of leading high performance teams and managing organizational level projects. He's worked through multiple enterprise deployments and leading frontline pandemic response, and he's focused on developing good people who positively impact their peers and the customers they serve. Welcome, Annie, Jim, and Matt. So glad you're all here today.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Hi, everyone.
All right, let's get started. We have a meaty conversation today. And let's start with Annie. Can you share a little bit about what Ford is trying to accomplish and why it's so important to change now and really how you all got started on this journey?
Sure, yeah. I think one of the things that Ford is really trying to accomplish, right, is we're trying to, the automotive industry in general, right, is really trying to like launch itself into the future. It's kind of like the newest tech space. And so Ford is really trying to start to lean into some of the best practices that we've seen in other industries that have kind of made that jump previously. And so that's a lot of the things that we're focused on and really focused on, like, how do we work towards that future, given that the mobility industry is like really changing, super fast paced at this point. And we're seeing a lot of like shifting in what we do and how we do it. I think those are like some of the big challenges that we're focusing on in the near term. I don't know, Jim, if you have any things to add to that.
Yeah, just to build from that, Annie, it's really coming down to our Ford Plus plan that we've set forth. Our CEO, Jim Farley, has a big vision for growth and value creation, and that really focuses on modernizing our business, creating those always-on customer relationships, which are very focused on digital solutions, on electrification, on serving our customers. And so that's requiring us to be ambitious, to move faster, to change the way we work across these new business units we've created, which creates challenges for connection points, for collaboration, for localization, all of which we'll get into here on the webinar. But it's all ultimately all driving from the top, from our plan, and you know, some of these tools that we're exploring and implementing now are helping us do that.
It's crazy to think that a company that's once known as just an automotive company or a car company is a technology company now, and how you need to accelerate the rate of change and the pace of change to align to the digital needs and the technological needs of the business. So when you began to embark on this journey, what gaps did you all identify between your previous operating model and what was actually needed to navigate the new headwinds in the industry?
It's a good question, and I'll start, and then curious to get Annie and Matt's take as well. But as I mentioned, with the reorganization of Ford into three main business units, we have our Ford Blue business unit focused on our gas and iconic vehicles. We have Ford Model E, which is focused on electrification, and then Ford Pro, which is the team that I currently work in, which is focused on commercial customers. And so the Ford Pro journey has very much been over the last year or so to think differently, to act like a startup, and be that leading edge for the Ford Plus plan that I mentioned. And so key gaps when we were starting Ford Pro and building the team and accelerating on some of our initiatives was we were finding that we're very focused on an annual view of planning. We wanted to move to a more agile quarterly view. We had a lack of overall transparency in our strategy across our team. And the strategy was essentially locked up in static PowerPoint decks, not accessible by everybody, which was a key gap we wanted to address. Leaders were setting goals, but there was that lack of flow down or localization. And we were too focused on setting what I would call safe targets that we felt that we would achieve based on our business plan, rather than focusing on best possible outcomes. So we wanted to be more aspirational within Ford Pro, and focusing on not only these final outcomes, but also what were those leading indicators that we could ladder up to the financial results that we're ultimately trying to achieve. So as we were progressing through our operating model, identified objectives and key results, or OKRs, as a key piece to address all of those gaps, and looking forward to talking a little bit more about how we're doing that.
That's awesome. And where did you start this process of finding a new approach? Obviously, there's a lot of different elements in the change that you described, Jim, and we're going to get into those. But where did you all start this journey in the process?
Yeah, I can start. So Jim just talked about Ford Pro. So I'm part of Ford Model E, and I was a chief of staff for our digital product arm of that. And honestly, when we first just started thinking about, like, how do we goal set? Really, really simply, like, how do we start to align our business towards these larger picture goals and ultimately to Ford Plus, as we mentioned. And we really broke it down to something super simple, to start to leverage some of the frameworks that existed in the world, right? That other people were employing as best practices and things like that. And it was like very, very basic at the onset. It was just like, hey, what would it look like if we adopted some of these methods? And would that help us, right, with that alignment? And I feel like it's been a journey. And I know Jim has some perspectives. I'm sure Matt with Ford Credit as well has some perspectives on that.
We'll talk a little bit about the journey aspect, because spoiler alert, there might never be a destination. Like, every single step of the journey is the destination, and there's learnings along the way. So we'll get into that. And Annie and Matt, it'd be great to hear from your perspective, how has the operating rhythm changed over the past couple of years? What did it look like before, and what does it look like now?
Yeah, as we have gone through this process, and as we've talked to, getting feedback from other people, like the standard, operating rhythm that you'll hear across our teams was that it used to be a very cascaded approach of, hey, in probably December, right, our fiscal year is the calendar year, December, the entire organization would figure out where we're going, and then January, February, the business units would get that figured out, and then cascade it down to and so by like March, maybe you would lock in kind of, this is the work that you're going to be doing for this year. So you've already lost 3 months, right? And then from there, October, November, you kind of need to be finishing it so that you can be writing the reviews and getting ready for the next year. So it's really, you're packing all that work into this time, and you're locking it in, and that's where you're going. And no matter what's changing or this is part of my plan, this is where I'm going. And we're definitely moving and still in the process of getting the journey, as we're saying, of getting more iterative and getting every quarter doing that, which feels like every time we set our OKRs, I'm already reaching out to people saying, hey, let's start planning for the next ones, which definitely feels new and a little like, hey, didn't we just do this? But it has helped sharpen and focus people through that process.
Yeah, if you think about that timeline you laid out, Matt, it's okay, we're not setting till March, and then we have to do reviews in October, and really you've lost half the year at that point. And with the big, bold strategy that Ford is trying to accomplish, like you need that extra 6 months. Like you can't lose that time. And so how do we get everyone really on the same page to be using every single day of the year, every single working day of the year to move the needle on something broader that Ford is trying to accomplish? And that starts with making sure, one, everyone knows what that is, and then two, having a method or a mechanism so that people have the transparency and they're executing on the right things day in, day out. Obviously, the three of you come from three different groups across Ford, and there's many intersections, but I'm curious, how have you created the alignment within your own groups? And then how did you drive kind of broader lateral alignment across the organization, and how important has that been kind of given the transformation you're driving?
Yeah, great question. And maybe I'll start, and then Annie and Matt, love to get your thoughts as well. So Ford Pro, as it's defined, is very much a cross-functional team and business unit. The charge and main focus of our strategy is to be an end-to-end solution for commercial customers. So just by definition, we're working across the organization to bring these solutions together, owning the go-to-market strategy and the customer relationship. So we pull in solutions from Ford Credit and Matt's team. We pull in our digital solutions from Annie's team and bundle it together, into that package that commercial customers can easily consume. So in the way that we work, it requires that connection point, that alignment, that transparency to deliver on those objectives. And now that we're seeing such a great critical mass in leveraging objectives and key results and the WorkBoard tool across Ford, we're able to get that transparency. Leaders are able to look across the organization, set their objectives, align them in the system, look to see for frequent updates where things are potentially off track, lean into the red, of certain key results, and then engage in a more real-time basis, as opposed to waiting for maybe a monthly review. You're able to ask questions, highlight things that maybe off track, and have corrective action that is much more is quicker and more adaptive in that process. So really seeing those OKRs across the organization, being able to drive down and localize, within our own team, across the team structure, so that the individual teams know how they're laddering up to those broader and longer term objectives that we've set, has really helped us to drive towards prioritization and achievement of results. So I'm curious if Andy, if you have anything to add to that from a Model E and digital perspective.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think within our teams, OKRs have really helped align cross-functional working teams that are really driving towards specific, especially on the digital product side, product outcomes and user engagement, things like that. And so we've been able to leverage it to actually help our cross-functional teams really get on board with the same goals and working towards the same thing. So that's been amazing. I think the other piece for the broader alignment across the enterprise, kind of what Jim was saying, right? We've been able to leverage it as hey, here are the things that are, important to us this quarter. Here, to have a conversation around what are the things that we're going to work on. How do we start to package them up into certain services or businesses that we can leverage? And so that's been really beneficial to share, and also to use as a part of the conversation, right? Having a conversation that's ongoing about what we're working on throughout the year really helps drive that alignment. It's not just a one and done sort of situation. So.
And I would just even build off that, right? Alignment. I mean, I think alignment, just, coming out of the pandemic, right? Alignment's hard, even being in the same room with the people you're working, much less cross-functionally, all that. And then now throw the digital aspect of being remote and trying to be on the same page. And by putting what the outcomes, what you're trying to drive to on paper, it forces people to at least see it and have to ask questions if they don't understand it. Because it's okay, wait, you're saying this and you want me to do this for you, but when I when I start to put my updates in there, or let people know where I'm going with my OKRs, it provides that clarity if you're seeing it on a more regular basis of going like, oh wait, you're putting that as you succeeded. I thought you were going to do this for me, and that's what success was. So it just starts those conversations both internally in your teams as well as across other teams.
One of the benefits of outcomes over outputs, right, which is truly aligning on what does success look like and like what would be awesome versus okay, what are all the things you're going to go do, like what's on your checklist. And it drives a different conversation, and I find it to be incredibly clarifying with these cross-functional teams and product teams that maybe there's groups of people that need to come together that haven't traditionally worked together, or they don't fall on the same organizational structure, but everyone needs to come together to rally around a shared success measure or a shared outcome, really, and that aligns with the ultimate strategy of the business and the needles we're trying to move. So I think that's really powerful. What has the appetite been across the teams? How have you really driven the momentum across the organization, and what were some of the keys to change? I know, Matt, you've been critical in this juncture, so I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I mean, I think like in general, right, when you talk to anybody about saying, hey, we want to be clear with our goals, we want to have outcomes, we want to really talk about what's great and what's going to be awesome this quarter or this year to look for you. And I think everybody gets behind that, right? And then it's the mechanics of actually doing it in amongst all the other things that you're doing. And I'd say probably like for anybody starting this process, one of the fundamentals is getting a coach community or getting a champion community, however you want to call it, of people starting at that baseline who have an understanding of what's going on, and really try not to. I'd say just some lessons learned from what we've done is try not to necessarily just have it be that extra, hey, I need like 10, and everybody just kind of assigns one to you, and that person doesn't even really know what they're doing, much less are interested in it. The more engaged, the more excited they're about the process, they're going to be the ones going to the teams and actually talking through this. And when they're developing OKRs, of really helping make sure we all have the same process and same mindset. So that's been, I think, incredibly instrumental to us, is just, especially in credit, having a really solid coach team that has really, I can invest in them, and then they can go and invest in the teams and work through that process.
And for those that don't know what this coaching community looks like, it is a group of folks within the organization who are helping kind of the tentacles off you three, driving the change, and experts in what makes a great objective, what makes a great set of key results, what does an outcome look like over an output, and then how do we embed that into the rhythm of the business so that we have experts across, not just a few within Ford. Jim and Annie, what else have you seen drive the momentum within the organization from your perspective?
I can start. I think the coaching for sure, having a group of early adopters and people that are willing to test things out and try them and see what works and what doesn't work really early on is very helpful. I think the other thing too that we leveraged, especially when we were first starting our journey, was really having leadership and someone that, like, our digital product leader is Alex, and having someone like Alex be kind of the person that's putting themselves out there, being the person that's willing to say like, hey, I didn't meet my goals, right? And it's okay, like we'll just adapt and move forward. So really having like that vocal champion who is willing to like kind of be on the line for the process and share like his perspective and things I think that really helped us, at least.
Yeah, and just to build on that as well, for us in Ford Pro, it was, we found a lot of success in a phased approach. So starting with the leadership champions and community first, as was mentioned, building that muscle within the leadership team so that they could be advocates for the approach, for the methodology, for the tool. They can really lean into it. And then as we communicate it in terms of change management, it's about messaging the benefits as well. So it's not, this is an additional thing you have to do. This isn't an and, this is, replacing existing processes. This is making your jobs and life easier. It's more efficient, and it's not, rolling out an additional process to build on and ladder up, on top of other existing things, right? So being very clear about the benefits, having that messaging come from leadership, and taking your time, because it is very much a continuous improvement process. You're not going to be perfect at writing OKRs on day one. You won't be perfect at leveraging all the features, and you have to recognize it's a couple of quarter process, and each day, each week you get better at it, and you see really that quality drive through the team. And when you start to see the lights click on and those aha moments from the teams, it's really exciting.
I think one of the things that you said there's so key to hit on, which is this shouldn't be additive to people's day. This should be, if you're going to do OKRs, and I'm using air quotes because who cares if we call them OKRs or ABCs or whatever acronym we choose. No one needs another acronym. There are plenty at Ford already. There's plenty in every company. This is the way we're going to go execute and align on what our strategic priorities are. And if we want to go align and execute on them, and maybe we were or weren't executing before, maybe we have a new strategy or transformative strategy we're driving, we need to work in a different way. So we should embed this into the way that we're working, so we really focus on the right things. A gut check for team members is always, if the OKRs feel additive or the conversation feels additive or a parallel process to what you're doing today, you probably don't have the right objectives and key results set, if that's not something you want to be discussing on a regular basis. And best practice that we see is bring your objectives and key results into your weekly team huddles or your weekly team meetings or your monthly business reviews, whatever the existing business cadence might look like, bring them right in there. And the other thing the three of you all touched on is the importance of the leadership buy-in. I think having the voice, wherever that might come from, but having a voice in leadership saying and reminding the organization of why this matters and what's in it for them is super, super important, because everyone's looking to their leader and saying, is this just a phase? Like, will this also just pass? Is this another thing that we're going to go do? And really, there's that, I think that saying, which is you need to hear something 7 times to remember it. I think now people are saying in COVID times or pandemic times, like 21 times or even more than that, right? And people need to hear the why and the what's in it for them and why they should change, and hearing that from their leader, and their leader demonstrating the right behaviors and the change in behaviors is really, really important and helpful to drive the change.
And Samira, I just even build off that. And I know we'll talk, but like what you said is if it feels additive or other, you're probably rating the wrong thing. And I know all of us have probably felt this, that often whatever tool you're using to do your epics or stories or your work streams or whatever, that often will become your tool for goals. And you really almost have we use Rally, so we call it Rally 2.0, that sometimes these OKRs can be where you're just listing all that stuff. And then it feels additive. It doesn't feel like it's actually implementing something. So really getting to that core, what's the outcome you're driving, like you said, is incredibly important.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm going to pull the thread on the Rally bit a little bit, because there's a lot of product and engineering teams that their first tendency might be, let me just replace what's in my existing Rally or Jira or whatever tool you might be using. And the point you made, Matt, is no, these are the outcomes, and maybe the tasks and how we're going to go get to those outcomes live in that existing tool set. But this is where we're going to memorialize, okay, where do we want to be at the end of the quarter? And then day in, day out, we might be doing the day-to-day execution in Rally or Jira, but in WorkBoard is where we're memorializing the outcomes we're driving to. So with any change, and this is for sure change in most organizations, we need to drive the change management, and that can also be sometimes a scary word for some organizations, but nevertheless, we are driving change. And so what were some of maybe the biggest challenge in driving the change management, and how did you navigate that?
I can start. So when it came to the change management for us, we like I mentioned, we work in in balanced product teams, and so we had this challenge where it was just a large quantity of people, very large volume. And so getting kind of these like balanced product teams on the same page, and getting them up and running required a lot of communication. This is again where like having the vocal proponents of the of goal setting generally, right, being in the org and being really embedded really helped. But it was just like a large volume of communication and getting it out there, and being cognizant of the fact that like it's not going to happen overnight. And we had to bring our full balanced product teams along for the ride and for the journey. And so that meant that there was a lot of like depending on those cross-functional relationships, making sure that like people were working together to align to some of our strategic priorities. And some of those things were things that just took time, and like sitting in with teams and understanding where they were struggling and what they were struggling with.
Everyone expects it to be an overnight thing, but you know, it's gonna take time and it's gonna take some, you know, persistence and repetition to get people where you want them to go. Jim and Matt, anything you want to add to Annie's comment?
Yeah, for us, it was very much a focus on clear communications, and don't be afraid to over communicate, to have the message, the resource, the reason, the why behind what we're doing to really sink in, and having those messages again come from our senior leaders to make sure that the organization, the team knows that, you know, we're serious about this and really developing this muscle internally. So focusing on the communications and then having the availability of training, and not only just one training, but continuous resources, continuous follow-up, because what we found with our team is, you know, you can go through a 30-minute, 60-minute training, you can understand coming out the methodology, but until you really sit down and start to think through your own work streams, how that drives to outcomes, how that connects to the strategy, that's when you really develop questions. And it, you know, be great to be able to bounce those questions and discuss with experts and the rest of the team. So having, again, the phased approach to training, to have follow-ups, to have resources on demand, whether those are videos or other one-on-ones, was really helpful for our team. And you know, a training resource continuing to build out for the team as we continue to expand as well. You know, it's never perfect when it comes to change management, but as long as you're focusing on the right things and focusing on the communication, being very clear, you set yourself up for success.
I would echo everything that said. The training and resources are huge, and I think the one other thing that I've learned too through it is buy into the process myself, right? I can come up with my plan and just say this is what it's going to be, but it, you know, one of the beauties of this process is we're focusing on the outcome and we're learning along the way of how to get to that outcome. So with even your implementation plan, you want to stick to it, right? You don't want to be wishy-washy, but understanding that there's going to be some learnings, there's going to be some where you maybe push too far and you need to come back a little bit, or you need to now push forward, and learning and adapting to that has been important.
That's awesome. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, because the Ford team, all of you in each of your own respective organizations have made tremendous impact and you've seen a ton of success. So for each of you, what has the impact been so far in your own orgs, and what results have you seen, and what are you hoping to see next? So we can, maybe Annie, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things to also bring up in this is we like recently went through a lot of reorganization. I mean, I'm sure those of you on the line have seen the like Model E, Ford Blue, all of those things. And so it's been really interesting, because one of the things that I've seen through that is teams are still kind of checking in with their OKRs and leveraging them as like direction setting, despite potential like organizational chaos around them. And so it's really nice for us to see, or at least for me to see, that like that's been kind of a guiding light, right? Like, okay, I understand there's a lot of churn. I understand there's a lot of organizational structure that's kind of happening around me, but with my product team, I can still understand some of the vision and the goals that we're trying to achieve. That's been really amazing to see as a result, that like people are still having those conversations and working towards some of those things as a team, where like some of those cross-functional conversations, at least for us, might not have been happening, right? And there wasn't potentially that clear product strategy alignment, which has been really, really beneficial for us, right, as we start to try to move into this new future of mobility.
It almost becomes the constant in the state of change.
Right.
Surrounding everything.
And one of
Yeah,
the,
go ahead, Jim.
go ahead, Matt.
No, you go ahead.
So I would say for Ford Pro, one of the main impacts we've seen is it's causing us to think differently, which is really exciting. Think differently in terms of our ambitions. You're starting to see that in the conversations with the team, having those long-term statements of intent and vision that we're capturing in our objectives, but then breaking that out and saying, okay, well, what does success look like in this quarter? Focused on outcomes, focused on metrics to achieve that, you know, in the longer term. And being able to talk in that way has really helped us to ladder up to our strategy. And one of the key results, I would say, from the last 6 months or so is in surveying the team across Ford Pro of, do you understand the Ford Pro strategy? Do you understand where we're headed? We've seen a significant increase in the percentage, you know, of the team, almost up, you know, to 100% at this point, because they can see and we can point to that this is it. This is how we're breaking down our strategy, how we're localizing. You know, it all connects together, and that answers a lot of questions. It's preempts and is proactive for the team. You know, to be able to do their own discovery in that way as well. So to be able to coalesce around what we're trying to drive in those outcomes, to be ambitious, definitely changes the conversation, and it's very exciting to see. Again, still a ways to go. It's never perfect, but definitely seeing the results.
But kudos to you. That's awesome impact. Nearly 100% of the team understanding what the strategy is, because I'm sure the four of us and everyone on the phone has at some point in their career sat at their desk or at their computer and thought, like, is the work that I'm doing making an impact? And when some portion of your brain or your kind of mindset is thinking that, that means that portion of your mindset and your brain aren't executing on what the strategic priorities are. And so when you can have nearly 100% of the team like knowing what the strategic priorities are, how they make an impact, huge, huge.
Yeah, and just adding on to all of this, you know, we're about 9 months. I think we're a little bit farther than Ford Pro, just in 3 months more, but we have seen just this third final quarter is where some of the, like, it's less about the process, less about the discussion, like how to develop these, what do you mean? It's more asking those very important questions of just like, well, so what is success? You said you're 50% done. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, what are you driving to? What is the outcome that you're going to? And we're just slowly starting to see people ask those questions. Again, rather than just like an update, they want to know what that outcome is, and I think that's important. And then the other part is we have taken what was initially our strategy of kind of doing everything, and we've really started to narrow down on what we think are going to be the most transformational and important things for our business, and really focusing the valuable time that our leaders you know, don't have enough of, and really focusing the discussion around those transformational efforts within our meetings and times together.
Have you seen and just to double click on that, have you seen a shift in the kind of the efficiency within the meetings in terms of time spent prepping and then getting to the meat of the discussion faster? Or what is the
we've definitely, and we're again just moving through this process and really starting to, but yes, we have seen from updates where everybody's talking and you're really like at that shallow end of the pool, right? And just you know, somebody might have a question and it's like, oh, we want to dig into that, but we got to jump to this business unit to talk about it, where we now have a little bit more time to sit and talk through something somebody brought up that either there's not alignment, or hey, I can assist you with that, like, let me help you with that, and talk through that instead of saying, hey, let's have a post meeting for another meeting and get your team together. You know, it's allowed that time to have those discussions.
Awesome. I have a few more questions for the three of you, and you're just sharing a wealth of knowledge, so thank you. For the audience, if you have questions for Annie, Matt, or Jim, feel free to just put them in the question panel box you see on your screen, and we are happy to answer those as well. And I see a few questions that are coming in. So Matt, another question for you specifically, kind of given your role, and then Annie and Jim, feel free to chime in, but what factors did you all anticipate the most and least along this journey, and what were their impact, and how some of those learnings influenced your current approach in enrolling and aligning the rest of the organization on the strategic priorities?
Yeah, I think one of the factors that I didn't take into account early on, and you can especially, you know, as you start to get into any methodology, you become like a purist. You want to do it this way, and you can try to really get everybody to do it this. And initially, everybody was just wanting to list all the work they're doing and having it as their, you know, objectives or key results, and people were coming with multiple sheets of paper of things that they were going to accomplish that quarter. And you again immediately want to jump in and be like, hey, you only need 3 to 5, like focus on this. But what we did at least like learn from that is as teams started to write everything and tried to track through it, you kind of let them run with it. And they came back and said, okay, I've seen all the work we're doing. We can't accomplish it all. We need to focus. And it was a self kind of reflection because of the process of putting on paper. So allowing to give that little bit of freedom to step back and say, hey, this is what we recommend, but if that's what you want to go with, let's try it. But again, this is what the recommendation is. They then have some of their own self kind of reflection moments that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting more people just to, hey, stick to the process and this will work better for you, but you got to let people learn.
The first quarter, often it's like, oh man, someone's going to find out that I'm not aligned. So let me just put everything out there, everything that I'm doing. And then, or that I'm not doing enough work. And then you realize that, oh, wait, actually, our leaders want us to focus on the right things. And this is going to be a way to course correct that and really hone in on what really, really matters, which sometimes means stopping things that we've been doing historically, which is uncomfortable for some folks. Like, oh man, I've been doing this for so long. And now you're telling me it's not important? Now what? But that's part of the process as well, like really like letting go and not focusing on things that don't make an impact and focusing on things that make the most impact within the organization. All right, but the last question for me, and there's a couple questions from the audience, but what is the most surprising positive impact you've all seen thus far? And that can be something that shocked you and had a great impact, or maybe even a word that describes the impact that you've all been having and seeing.
Yeah, for me, I'll share 2 of them. So as part of the, you know, this framework and way of thinking, what actually surprised me a bit was how sometimes difficult it is to quantify the key results and put the right metric into place. And so the positive impact that I've seen from it is by forcing you to do that, it helps you understand, you know, the why. Why are you doing this? If you can't quantify it, is this the right thing to be doing? What is that outcome that ultimately matters to the customer, right, to the business? And so continuing to build that skill set of being able to quantify, identify the right metrics, measure what's important has been a big positive impact. And the second part, and it's related, is doing that work up front. While it's required more work, more time invested at the beginning of the quarter, it really does return and pay dividends throughout the quarter. By investing that time, the clarity is there, the discussions, the reviews are higher quality, and so that's been a real positive impact for us, and continuing to get better at that over time as well.
And
I'd say
go ahead.
Sorry, Matt. I mean, there's 500 hours in a quarter, and you just take the first 3 hours of the quarter to align on what's going to be great, so you can use the 500 hours to your advantage, rather than saying, okay, we have the 500 hours, we need to go. Like, take the time, plan, and be mindful of how and where you spend your time.
And then I think just an important process of the operating rhythm of staying engaged with these goals and not just setting them and coming back. That's, I think I've heard it from, the WorkBoard team, if you've only do OKRs once a quarter, you've only done it 4 times a year. So staying engaged with them and keeping them at the top of meetings and having them build agendas around them in your one-on-ones and other items is important to building and making really good OKRs, or again, whatever process or acronym you're going to use. And then I think the aha or really cool moment lately was just as I was talking to senior leader, and they just said, hey, if we weren't using this tool, what would we be doing to execute our strategy? Like, how else would we be making sure that this is happening? And it would probably be large decks of PowerPoints that people talk about once a month, maybe. So just that, again, getting that continuative process has been great.
Awesome. Annie, anything you'd like to share?
I mean, I think the only other thing that I would add is that sometimes there's a lot of struggle with just general communication within teams, and especially being virtual or mostly virtual. And so one other positive thing that I've seen come out of this is just like those conversations finally happening, and like truly being about moving the team forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing that. We have a few questions from the audience. The first is specifically in regards to your OKRs. Are they individual based, team based, or a mix of both?
So the way that we've been implementing in Ford Pro is team based. So we've broken down the team structure basically into levels. So we have level 1 through 3 that we've implemented so far, coming down from our CEO down into our leadership team, and then one level down, focused on team outcomes. And by defining that and aligning with the team, that then helps you set your personal goals or objectives for that quarter as well, what you can personally contribute to, and also personal development as well. So we see them as 2 separate things, and we're focusing on the team based in WorkBoard.
Yep, that's a fairly common approach where we see teams can be both functional, so following the organizational chart, or cross-functional, like the product teams you described earlier, but they're groups of people coming together to align on what the best possible outcomes are. And then there's individual objectives that are set both for personal growth and development, or often the outputs that support the team-based outcomes that are aligned to the compensation process and whatnot within your organization. For some groups, not yet for Ford, but for others, often WorkBoard is a source of truth for both, so you can see them coexist in one spot. Although the individual goals are not, they're not necessarily stretch all the time. Depends on your existing philosophy, how you want to approach that, and what your current structure looks like within your organization. The next question, Annie, I'll throw this one to you, is how long has Ford been on the OKR journey? How is adoption going?
Sure. I think we started our OKR journey, I want to say late in 2020. Trying to think if that's right. Yeah, I would say late in 2020. And I actually think adoption has been quite impressive overall. I mean, I would say I dragged Jim and Matt into this mess with me. So there's been, like I said, there's been some organizational changes which has impacted some of our adoption, but since then, I think there's been a decent amount of adoption throughout the the enterprise as a whole. And we've seen it propagate to quite a few teams, at least at the leadership levels, where maybe it was a little unexpected, but there's certainly been a lot of interest, which has been great to see.
Awesome. And so many people, same with Ford, like coming into the pandemic or going into 2020, there was an acceleration of, oh man, we need to change the strategy or accelerate our existing strategy or transformation that we're on. And this obviously becomes the vehicle, no pun intended, for that. The next question, and I'll take this one first, and then I'd love to hear from all of you as well, is do you feel that CFRs, conversations, feedback, and recognition play a vital role in the OKR process? So the CFR acronym comes from the Measure What Matters book. So if you've read that, that is one school of thought on OKRs. What I will say is no need to add another acronym, but the objectives and key results that your team defines should be part of the discussions and conversations your team is having, whether that be in one-on-ones, whether that be in team meetings, whether that is part of the quarterly retrospective and reset of the objectives and key results. Those are all critical and those play a vital role in the OKR process, as well as making sure that your leaders and team members alike are recognizing folks for the efforts and they're making on the key results. And the efforts really equate to the focus on the outcomes versus focus on everything else. So whether or not you use the acronym CFRs, it's important that your objectives and key results are part of the day-to-day discussions and the rhythm of the business. I don't know if the Ford team would add anything more to that.
I mean, I think it's no matter what process you're using, right? Whatever your either next level leader or leaders up the chain are focused on and are engaging with. So whether, again, whatever process, if they're engaged in that is just what naturally we as human beings are going to start to focus on and help drive it. So I think the more engagement from leadership around the tool and the process, the more adoption and the more buy-in you're going to get.
For sure. And this ties to the last question we have, and then we'll wrap it up here. Is can a smaller group within the company be successful with this approach if it isn't adopted company-wide? If so, any tips on how a smaller team can transition to this operating rhythm? I'll start by saying for sure. Like if you have a team that wants to start, go. You're going to be the change agents in your organizations. Have a leader that's on board, get started, and you'll find that there's an appetite in the organization to get clarity, and it'll start to permeate wider and wider. You don't need to start at the top of your org if that's not where you're starting today. Just start is my advice.
And I'd agree. And we've seen it at I think probably with each of our business units, but you know, I know at Ford Credit we all kind of adopted it, but really there was one actually the group that's supporting Ford Pro that really adopted it and really drove in. And again, I think the key is that leader has to be really at that level engaged in it, even if they're not necessarily talking it to their boss in that same language, but they're engaged with their team. Was what was important for that smaller team to implement it within our team.
And I do see many benefits that can come from smaller group implementation, the way you can structure your thinking, lay things out, you know, get alignment within your team, and then easy ways to communicate it across the business as well. Export certain results, you know, making it easy and clear for other teams to understand where you're headed. And what we found is the more that you implement and share, the more other teams will be interested in as well in adopting, and the network effects will just build from there.
Awesome. Annie, Jim, and Matt, any final words of wisdom to everyone before we part ways for this week?
Just keep it simple as much as you can. Simplicity is key, and that's how you drive engagement, is as having simple message that resonate with the team and drive forward.
Love that. Well, thank you all for being part of this conversation. I learned a ton. I'm sure everyone on the phone learned a ton. I love partnering with all of you. Our team loves partnering with you, and we're super excited to support Ford's success in this journey and be a small part of it. So thanks for your time. And for those of you who joined us, thank you for joining us. There's a couple handouts you can use if you're just beginning the OKR journey within your organization, or you've already started and you can get some tips and tricks. But Annie, Matt, and Jim, thank you again. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.